guys, and it's so nice for you and Zora to be here today. I really, really appreciate you guys being our first TNSA Talk of the year. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and I also have screen sharing on if you need that.
Charlene, thank you so much. And hello, everybody. It is a pleasure and honor for Zora and I to join you today. Thank you so much for the opportunity of sharing a little bit about what we're building with Litterati and how we're working with cities around the country, and hopefully learning a little bit about, how we might be able to provide value to your different programs and initiatives. So I know that we have a full hour cut out for this. I can assure you I will not take all of that time, but I would like to take just a few minutes to share my screen, give you some visuals so that you have a real understanding of the type of technology platform that we've built. Feel free to interrupt at any point. If you have questions, you can throw them in the chat. Zora will answer them either in the written form, or feel free to just ask verbally, and happy to answer as we go. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen. And all right, if somebody could just give me a thumbs up to let me know that you see that, I think that we're ready to go. Thank you, Charlene. Okay, so there is an undeniable shift happening in the world. And I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so if somebody wouldn't mind going on mute, that might be helpful. Sorry about that. So there's this undeniable shift going on in the world, and we're going to talk about two. But the first one that you are all going to be very familiar with is that there's a ton of material leaking out of the system. So what we mean by that is about 1/3 of all waste does not end up where it's supposed to, meaning in a landfill, in a recycling bin, in a compost bin. It is falling between the cracks, about 1/3 of it, much of which is ending up in our storm drains. And what's happening is that everybody's pointing a finger at everybody else, right? Blame is going around to everybody. But the municipalities are the ones that are really bearing the cost. It is coming down on the weight of government to really handle this problem. And for years, we have been trying to solve this problem with, frankly, solutions that aren't really making a dent. $1,000 littering, the threat of $1,000 littering fine, or maybe people signing a pledge to say, I will not litter. These are, these are programs and initiatives that we've done traditionally for decades, and unfortunately, the problem isn't getting any better. As a result, we're seeing three things happen with cities and municipalities. The first is resources are absolutely stretched. And not only are they stretched, but they are falling into different departments. In one city, in one municipality, you might have it in the Department of Sanitation, or Public Works, or Parks and Rec, or the Department of Transportation. That leads to a very difficult ability to measure, is anything we're doing effective whatsoever? Are we getting any return on all this time and all this capital that we're investing into solving the problem? And that leads to all of us continuing to grow more and more frustrated because we're just not seeing any change that's being made. The second shift that's happening is that everybody is, I would say, starved for data, because all of the decisions that so many of the stormwater coordinators and managers and government officials have been making have been in the absence of data. We're almost just throwing darts at a board and hoping that we're coming up with solutions. And that's really why Litterati exists. We are founded on the principle that in order to really solve this problem of litter and manage stormwaters effectively, we need data, and we need accurate, reliable, consistent data. For us, we built a platform that we like to say is simple yet sophisticated. iOS and Android application, anybody can download it, and all you do is take a photograph. That photograph holds quite a bit of data, and it looks like my computer has just frozen. There we go. So that photograph holds quite a bit of data. You and I look at this photo that I've just snapped of a Red Bull can, and that's what we see. We see a Red Bull can. But what we've done at Litterati is we've built a technology that uses artificial intelligence or computer vision models to look at that photograph and see more than just the Red Bull can. Our technology sees what the naked eye cannot. It sees that there's 5 objects within this photograph, and then we take it to the next step, which is, well, can we identify them automatically? So in this case, we first look at what's the object. So there's a bottle cap, there's a cigarette butt, there's a plastic lid, there's a can. Once we identify that object, we understand, well, what's the material? So that we can start to really get a sense of what's leaking out. And when possible, we then say, all right, well, can we identify that that's a Marlboro cigarette butt or a Red Bull can? And so we've built this taxonomy. We call it COMB, category, object, material, and brand, so that we can provide this consistent data to solve these problems. So we really know what we're up against. When we work with cities and municipalities, there are two programs that we have. We have one that's called Engage and one that's called Analyze. For the purpose of this presentation, we're going to talk mostly about Analyze and how that can really help with stormwater control. Let me give you a sense of what it's all about. This is deep-rooted analysis from a data perspective, getting to the most granular level on a foot-by-foot or meter-by-meter level of what every object, material, and brand is that is not making it back into the system. And then understanding what are the other data layers that we can look at that play a role in why those items get to the ground. So for example, are the proper recycling bins and trash cans in place in a given community? What are the policies in this given community? Where are the storm drains located? How can we redirect or optimize our current resources so that we are really attacking the problem at the root cause? And at a very high level, when we work with cities and our partners, we start with a very sort of scientific approach. We have a GIS team that works with a GIS partner at the city level and says, okay, this is Norfolk, Virginia, one of our partners that you're looking at. And we say, what are the locations that we want to really focus on so that we can get to that root cause? And this is typically what's called a stratified sampling, so that we have a statistically significant data set from which to work with. That we then turn into a heat map. And that heat map now lets you visualize, okay, where is the high density litter area? Where are the low density litter areas? In other words, where can we really apply our limited resources? We just kicked off that project with Norfolk. So let me shift and show you a project that we've completed with Austin. So Austin wanted to identify a number of locations and really analyze them. So here's just a quick snapshot of one particular area where there are 5 blocks. And we did, again, a block by block analysis. Each one of those blue geopins has an object, a material, and a brand associated with it. In addition to that, there's a timestamp and a specific geotag. So that an easy way to think about it is that every photo tells us who, what, where, and when. Then we begin to overlay other maps and other data sets to really make sense of this information. So for example, this Austin heat map, dark blue is a high density littered area. White or lighter blue is a lower density littered area. This starts to show you, okay, what parts of this city are areas where we need to concentrate. And then we do things like overlay, well, where are all the schools located in Austin? And how does that play a role? How does that correlate with litter? Or storm drain locations. And what was really fascinating with Austin was they wanted to understand, are we applying our resources to keeping the storm drains clear in the right way? Or are we better off looking at other areas where there's more litter escaping out of the system? Or we'll do things like illegal dump sites, because as you can imagine, illegal dump sites, when weather takes a hold of them, starts to spread the litter far and wide. So at the end of it, what we're really trying to do is create change, right? For us, the data is what ultimately leads to change. So I just want to give you 2 quick examples of how our data has led to change. The city of San Francisco had a very interesting question they wanted to answer, which is, what percentage of litter came from cigarettes? Why? Because they wanted to inform a tax on all cigarette sales. And so we worked with the city and collected approximately 5,000 pieces of data across 32 sites within the city. That data led to a 40-cent tax on all cigarette sales, which now generates $4 million a year, every single year, to help the city keep itself clean. So if you think about that for a second, the city had no income, no revenue stream before we did this, because they just hadn't taken the time to really understand what was lying on the ground. Suddenly, when you have that data, it can open up all sorts of avenues of possibilities. Engage. So this is our second product, and this might be helpful for those of you who are interested in MCMs 1 and 2 around public education, public awareness, public outreach. But Analyze, if that's deep data, researcher driven, where we as a company are identifying, mobilizing, and putting people on the ground, engages the volunteer effort. This is the crowd coming together to be part of a solution for any given city within Tennessee. And we have a playbook that helps those partners engage their citizens. I won't go deep into Engage, but effectively, it is a great way to track and total the impact generated by all of your citizens. And within our application, this is a quick snapshot of it, you can do things like set notifications so that, let's say tomorrow there's a cleanup at a particular park, that notification may go out a week ahead of time and everybody is now informed about when that's occurring. Or maybe there's a new capture device that's just been placed and you want to let people know that that's where their tax dollars are going. These are some of the features in the Engage platform. Well, what can Engage do when it comes to leading to change? Well, the city of Philadelphia was trying to pass a plastic bag ban for years, but they didn't have the data. And so after, I think it was 7 years of not having that data, we ran an Engage program with them, and that data generated by mostly school students, about 300 school students provided that data, which just led to a city ban on plastic bags. Here's a quick snapshot of some of the cities that we currently work with. City of Memphis, arguably one of the most innovative cities we have ever worked with on both the Engage Analyze side, has been a tremendous partner for us. And that's what I wanted to share. Our vision is that we've got this planet to clean. There is no way we are going to ever get there unless we know the battle we're fighting. And that's the role that data can play. So with that, let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen, open it up for some questions, and happy to answer anything you have.
And Jeff, I think it would be quicker for you for Patrick's question for you to answer than me type it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Let me just open up the chat window. Pardon me, Patrick.
Yep. And I can certainly answer it as well.
How do you differentiate between no data and no trash? Patrick, just so I understand what you're asking, are you asking, how do we say this particular area is actually quite clean, and so therefore
Right.
there's no trash?
Yeah. Going back to that Austin example.
Yep. So great question. On the Analyze side, typically when our GIS team will put together a map that has, what I didn't point out there was, in the map there will be sections that have what are called, I think they're called hashtags or crosshairs, but they are sections where we didn't collect any data. The bigger answer to your question, though, is when we work with a particular municipality, like I just showed with Norfolk, we will look at this stratified sample of areas to understand, are those the geographic spaces that that particular city wants to cover? And that's how we'll know either we did or did not pick up data in that area. If we did, if it's totally clean, that'll come up. In the case of our color coding, it would be, very, very white, so to speak, and not very, very
Okay.
red. Does that answer your question, Patrick?
It does. I was thinking just purely crowdsourcing, but there's a mix of crowdsourcing and focused effort at a municipal level when you partner.
That's exactly right. And one of the challenges, being completely transparent, of crowdsourced data, whether it's Litterati or any other organization, is bias, right? Data can be biased, will be biased, because you may have a lack of people in one given area and a lot of people in another area, or you may have people who say, you know what, I'm not taking a picture of that for whatever reason. One of the reasons we built Analyze was to create statistically significant, unbiased data. So our researchers in Austin, once we worked with that city, said, okay, here are the locations, and every single item in those locations was photographed and analyzed.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome. Oh, sorry, let me show you one other thing. So a little bit about, let me call out Memphis because they've been such a fantastic partner. So when we work with partners, there's a dashboard. And what that looks like, just to give you a real close sense, is this. So what you're looking at here, close that chat window, is just a some of the data that you receive through the Litterati platform. So the word Memphis is hidden, but you can see this is the general location of Memphis. Let me call your attention to the upper left-hand side. So this is first the total number of photographs that were taken, and this is an engaged part of the program, okay? So 16,000 images, which identified about 17,000 pieces. If you recall in that Red Bull photograph, there were 5 individual items of litter within one photograph, right? So hence the discrepancy. From only 229 participants. I mean, think of the impact that just this one group has had. What we've also done from feedback that we've gotten from different municipalities is they want to know what's the weight and what's the volume. So we've included weight and volume because we know that an empty aluminum can weighs X amount of ounces or grams, and we know that a piece of paper or a cigarette butt weighs Y. So we have both weight and volume. We've just started including this, which we think is really fascinating. Admittedly, it's an estimate, but we think it's going to be eye-opening from a city's perspective, or frankly, from any of the NGOs we work with, to understand how many hours does that take? What sort of contribution is my community making to keep my community clean? And so that's another piece of data. Below that is all of the breakdown. Let me blow this up just a little bit. So again, our taxonomy: comb, category, object, material, and brand. So we have a very, very good sense at the most granular level. What are the categories of things that are washing up? Or in the case of stormwater drains, or storm drains, ending up in the storm drains. And we break them into drinks, smoking, food, other. You can imagine that personal hygiene has increased dramatically because of PPE. We just had a report published in Nature last month of the spike in masks, wipes, and gloves as litter just because of the pandemic. On the object side, so you get a sense: cigarette butts versus wrappers, bottles, bags, gloves, etc. I mean, here it is: gloves, face masks. You can see that, 2 years ago, you would have never seen any of this. Today, they're becoming some of the most commonly found items. All the materials. And then below in this dashboard, brands. So not just the individual brands, whether it's a cigarette brand or a fast food brand or an alcoholic brand, but also what category they fall into. And then what are the parent companies? So for example, Fanta, Sprite, Capri Sun, 3 different brands, all owned by Coca-Cola. And what our partners are finding is that this has been helpful for really becoming more targeted in their communication outreach to some of these brands. And so that's a quick look at some of the data coming out of Memphis on the Litterati dashboard. I guess I'll just go ahead and run down. Zora, thank you for answering some of those. I'll take Joshua's question. Well, let me go up for a second.
Yeah, so Maria, Maria, I'm curious about generalizing. What's the percentage of litter in most municipalities that are from cigarette butts?
So Maria, this is a fascinating question. So we talk about this all the time because we just completed a what was it, Zora, 49 city global cigarette project, where we had to get very, very close to the cigarette the cigarette butt problem. So to answer your question directly, it's enormous. But to get even more nuanced, are you asking what's the percentage by piece, meaning by count, which is very different than what's the percentage by volume, which is very different than what's the percentage by weight, right? By weight, it's going to be tiny, obviously. By volume, also not so big. By piece or by count, enormous. It is the largest item we find by count, undoubtedly. The only close second would be sort of unidentified or unidentifiable fragments of plastic that are just, the size of my hand or smaller, that you just don't know what they are. They have no unique identifiers. So long answer to your question, but cigarettes are at the top of the list. And that is in almost every city, in almost every country around the world. Maria, I hope Zora and I answered that question.
You did, thank you.
You're welcome. By the way, we did a project in Vienna. So one of the things I didn't talk about in the presentation was the importance of monitoring. So on the analyze part of our platform, some of our partners do multi-phased monitoring. And the importance of that is that it gives you a sense of, are the initiatives that we're putting into place working or not? So for example, we did a project with a partner in the city of Vienna. And so we started with a baseline because the city wanted to know, okay, well, where are we starting today? And then they put in an initiative, and this was fascinating. The city of Vienna had, up until basically last year, allowed everyone to smoke cigarettes inside restaurants and bars. And then there was a moratorium on that. So they had a new policy. They wanted to understand, did that policy initiative make a difference? So we did 4 phases of monitoring and measuring, and we were able to demonstrate that when you put in a policy in these given neighborhoods that had, more restaurants and bars, that it can in fact make a difference. Now, it can also cause smokers to go outside. So we were able to say that as long as you have the right infrastructure in place, i.e. cigarette butt receptacles within X period of distance from the door of a restaurant or bar, it's a great change. But that's the importance of monitoring over time, and something we just completed in Vienna. So Joshua, you're asking, has this been used during stream cleanups along a stream bank or in water and not along road or sidewalk? Yes, it's used by a number of people in the marine debris world, whether it's around a lake, the beaches and oceans, or along a river. What we have built on the Analyze product, and I did not get into the details of this, but when we work with a city to do whoever to do an analyze, there's a portion of the application that effectively directs where a researcher is going to collect data. We call them segments. And a segment is approximately 100 meters long by about 2.5, 3 meters wide. And if any of you are familiar with the biking application Strava, where you bike and then it gives you a digest or readout of, here's the map of where I went, and here's how many miles I rode, and here's how much time it took. It's the same exact thing. So we have these segments that will say this many pieces were picked up, it took this much time, we covered this distance. Why is that important for Joshua's question? Because oftentimes we will break riverbanks into segments so that we can be assured that we are covering a statistically significant amount of distance. And it doesn't matter if it's researcher A or B, they're following the same methodology and protocol, because at the end of the day, we want data that is consistent so that it can be compared over time. Joshua, I hope that answered your question. Tom, what sort of photo is better? A close-in photo? I love this. So Tom asks, what sort of photo is better? A close-in photo that shows individual pieces of litter. I'm assuming that meant litter, or an overview of an area if there is a lot of litter. How is a pile of trash such as illegal dumping handled? Okay, so a couple things to unpack there. One of the beauties of computer vision, and one of the challenges, is that, to Tom's point, people take photos in different ways. And not only that, but people are of different heights. Some people may bend down, some people may stand up tall. And not only that, but people have different devices. I may have an old iPhone, Zora may have the bright new Android device. All of which to say, capturing those images isn't always necessarily providing the most consistent output. That's where the computer vision comes in. And here's the good side. What we are doing is training those models to recognize both the distance from ground to where the photo is snapped and the background. You can imagine a Starbucks cup sitting on a beach with sand looks different than a Starbucks cup sitting in a pile of leaves in the woods or in the middle of an urban environment with macadam as the background, right? And the beauty of technology is that you can train those models with more and more data, of which we have approximately 16 million data points growing at 50,000 a day, to get smarter and smarter and smarter. So Tom, the answer to your question is, it almost doesn't matter. It just depends on, do we have enough data at that level to inform to provide accurate data? When it comes to a handheld device versus a drone, today we only ingest that data through phones. So basically from 6 feet down to about 36 inches. That being said, we are building this platform. It has been built to ingest data from drones, from satellites, from streetcars, and that's exactly where we're heading on the product roadmap. The other part of your question is, how is a pile of trash? Actually, let me back up. One advantage to having an aerial photo of, let's say, an illegal dump, is that you can get a sense of a larger swath of land quickly. You're not going to pick up things like cigarette butts. You're not going to pick up Wrigley's gum wrappers. You're not going to pick up small Snickers wrappers, but you can get a sense from an illegal dumping area, illegal dump problem. Is this area worse off than others? We believe that ultimately you have to get to the ground truth. You have to get really, really close to understand the extent of the problem. And how is a pile of trash such as illegal dumping handled? We are doing that currently with some partners. It's tricky. It is not easy, but we do things like, first and foremost, identify the location. In fact, I just came from a call with the city of Oakland. It is their number one request. Help us identify where the illegal dump sites are, and then the composition, what is in that material, because they want to know what goes off to be recycled, what goes into a landfill, what is organic matter. And then the third issue is there personally identifiable information? For whatever it's worth, they have 30,000 calls a year. That blew me away. 30,000 calls a year just on illegal dumping. And, they're looking to figure out how to maintain that. I think those are the only questions that sorry, Brittany.
Helen just came in with, is there some kind of way to use Google Street View to collect additional data? May be hard to identify specific brands, but see trash.
Yeah, Helen, it's a great question. And in fact, we are I would say, somewhat constant conversation with a team at Google who is specifically focused on things like plastic pollution and using Google Streetcar to leverage the vehicles that are already driving around taking images. The answer is yes. Now, why is that helpful? Because it gives you a more comprehensive look at the problem. So if you take, Chattanooga, or Nashville, you can start to understand, okay, well, with Google Streetcars and Google Street View, this is typically an illegal dump area, or this highway is highly littered. One of the problems, or I should say shortcomings of Google Street View at this point is there's a huge latency. So they are not having 24-hour, cars drive around. An area may not change. They tell us about twice a year, you'll get the same point on the map refreshed. So it's not that often yet, but they're working on it. And it does, we think, provide a more comprehensive view to the problem. And then I'll jump up one more to Brittany, and Brittany, sorry that I skipped you on the way initially. How accurate is the identification in an area where there is a large amount of trash present? And Brittany, are you asking how accurate is the our ability to identify the object, material, and brand, or the geotagging? Can you be more specific?
Yeah, just like for an example, like around the storm drain, how everything washes towards a drain. And if you were to take a picture of it and there's like a lot of different pieces of litter there. And the other part was that, like, what if there's some litter that's covering another piece of litter underneath it? How accurate is it to identify that whole picture?
That's also, both of those are great questions. So in terms of the accuracy in identifying a particular piece, when there's, let's say, lots of other pieces around. Do you remember in the presentation when I showed the image of the Red Bull can, and you may have seen, I can draw it up real quick, but you may have seen the yellow boxes. So I'll show you real quick. These yellow boxes are what are referred to as bounding boxes. And what we have frankly had a lot of painstaking hours doing with our team is we look at a section of images. So typically it'll be 500,000, maybe 1 million. And believe it or not, there are people who go into each and every image and they draw what is called a bounding box. And it looks just like this. And a bounding box allows you to really hyper localize a given piece of litter, so that even if you do have, and this isn't bad, right? This is only 5 pieces, it's relatively spread out. You can imagine though, it gets closer and closer and closer in a really soiled area. But the bounding box is what the computer vision model focuses on. So as long as we can get close on a border, and we can, you're able to properly identify that with a threshold, what's called a confidence threshold in the 90% area. I will tell you that the computer vision model's output, meaning it's going to tell you that this is an aluminum Red Bull can, is only as good as the data that we feed it. So if we were to feed our model only Red Bull images of Red Bull cans, if we took a picture of a Coke can, it would say that's a Red Bull can. If we were to show a picture of a cigarette butt, it would say it's a Red Bull can. Fortunately, we have, or unfortunately, we have so much trash, we're able to constantly train those models. So we can get pretty accurate, but it's not perfect. And we're always improving it with data that's coming in. Your second question is something that we have been thinking about for quite some time, which is about if you only see a small piece of an item, can we still identify it? So same principle applies with the bounding box, but this makes it harder, obviously. So you may have to look for unique characteristics within, and when I say you, I mean like the computer vision models, may have to look for a unique characteristic within a given item. So I'll give you one example. Camel cigarettes. You probably don't know this, but they have actually a tiny camel on them. It's probably 2 millimeters big. If we can see just that camel portion of a camel cigarette, we can identify, we know exactly what the brand is, what the material is, what the object is. If we identify just the corner of the S in Snickers, because we have tens of thousands of other Snickers images, we can understand that that's a Snickers image. But again, not perfect, but getting better. Hope, Brittany, that answered your question.
It did. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Joshua, a great next question, which I see that Zora already answered. Something we handle in the database quite a bit as well. If there are any other questions, feel free to email Zora or I at any time. We'll provide our contact information. But actually, Tom, I see your question, so I'll grab that real quick. Tom, I live in Memphis and had led litter pickup events. We would separate recyclables and accepting tires. We found that probably 90% or so volume were recyclable plastic and glass bottles. Yes, not surprised. With some of the non-recyclable being bottles filled with soil or other contaminants. Is that what you found in your work? It is exactly what we have found in our work. I can't speak so much to say that most of the non-recyclables had soil in them. It's not a question that we typically ask of our researchers or of our community, but in my personal experience, and I have picked up 6 figures worth of litter, I have had the exact same experience. So yeah, Tom, something we have seen. And what's interesting about that is we have this, a fairly large educational component to what we do. We have a whole STEM-based K through 12 curriculum that some of our partners use for MCMs 1 or 2. And there's an opportunity to educate people that that item can be recycled, depending on where you live, and that there's real value to that material. It doesn't end up on the ground or in a landfill. On behalf of Zora and I, thank you for the opportunity. Again, happy to answer any questions you have the rest of today or at any other point. Charlene, I will hand it back over to you.
Anyone have any other questions? I do have a question. I was wondering if there is an app that you're aware of, or if you guys will ever be putting in something to help link litter with volunteers in certain areas.
So that is precisely what, and you're talking about volunteers who are already out there cleaning up communities, correct?
Yes, like for example, someone who maybe isn't interested in cleaning up, or they don't have the time and they see the litter and they would post a picture and put the area, then someone who has the time or needs hours for school or whatever, would be like, oh, I have time to go pick that up and I know where it is.
Oh, I misunderstood you. You're suggesting if my father, who is not going to go walk the streets and pick up litter, but being the biggest Litterati fan there is going to be the first person to say, hey, there's an area in Philadelphia that needs to be cleaned up. I'm putting an alert out. That's what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes. So there is nothing to my knowledge that exists today. I will tell you that we have on our product roadmap, not within the next quarter, but maybe towards the end of 2022, the notion of what we internally refer to as alerts. And it is exactly what you are describing. And the idea would be that any of our partners can essentially sound an alert that would go into the dashboard. And we would then either, depending if it's an engage project or an analyze, we could deploy those resources and also provide the feedback loop to the individual that set the alert to know that that problem had been taken care of.
Oh, okay. I think that would be great because I think that's what a lot of folks have issues with as well. I think the data collection is really interesting and let those folks know what is being littered. Maybe it can help those folks fund some different things in their areas. And also, I know that our folks have a hard time with trying to have litter events. You know, having time to plan them, get it together, that kind of stuff. So I really think that would help a lot of municipalities, organizations, nonprofits, and that kind of stuff to really get that kind of thing going. It would be very beneficial to them.
And just to follow up to that, when you're saying that some of your colleagues and partners are having a difficult time finding time to have those events, is it that there's just too much going on, or there's not a great tool to organize and sort of mobilize people and engage the community?
I would say both. A lot of our MS4s have part of a staff member, one person running the department, half of a person, a third of a person. Some folks have a good department in their larger cities, but the smaller folks have not even a whole person running the stormwater department. And they just can't wrap their head around trying to get that done. Now, and some of them do partner with nonprofits like the Keep America Beautifuls of the world and other, and other folks in their area. So they are fortunate, but a lot of the smaller outlying areas don't really have help, but I know that they have folks who want to help, but they just have a hard time getting all that taken care of, I believe.
Where I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, that is exactly the case. So there is one woman named Sammy Baugh who wears every single hat, and she is the only person who wears every single hat. And what we have built with Engage is effectively a dashboard and management system to mobilize, whether it's local businesses, local schools, local environmental clubs, to all come together and track all of their impact. If you recall that one slide I showed about tracking your total, it's that, like consolidating everything, both incoming and the outbound communication within that one dashboard, which is starting to really show some impact. But we know that is a big challenge for a lot of municipalities and stormwater managers.
Awesome. Well, that's good to know. I thought up that idea so many years ago when I was at Keep Blunt Beautiful. We just never received the funding and grant for it. But I thought, man, that would be great just to hook up people. Even as an organization who focus a lot on litter, you still need help, and the easier way to get to some of the younger folks is an app. Someone can take a picture, someone can go clean it up, and I just thought, man, how much cleaner would things be if you see a problem? You're headed to a meeting, you see a problem, and there's somebody, like a trash is falling off somebody's thing. You don't have time to get to it. Then maybe you forget about it later in the day, but if you had a second just to stop and say, okay, I'm going to remember this, take a picture, then someone had a chance to go pick it up, man, I just think everything would be so much cleaner.
Well, I guess maybe a good way for us to end on our side is that our goal is to make your lives easier and more impactful. And if we're not doing that, then we have no business being in business. And, with some of our partners, it's about being compliant and being able to have the data at their fingertips for easy reporting or more impactful reporting. For other partners, it's really about how many people can I engage in my community? And then for other partners, it's about, can I use that data to actually spend my resources in a much more strategic sense? And so that's how we work across the board.
Awesome. That's so exciting. I'm so glad you guys are here today.
Thank
Zora, is there anything else that needs to be addressed? I know we had a couple of questions and some conversation going on.
Hey, Jeff, I just want to reiterate a question from Maria Price. What is the obligation expectation from the city to become a partner with your business?
Thank you, Don. I had totally missed that question. So, and Maria, are you asking from a financial obligation or from a time?
All of the above.
Yeah, great question. So typically an Engage program, and these are both annual subscriptions. Engage starts at $10,000, is $10,000. Analyze is at $50,000. There's a variable with Analyze, which is the geographic coverage, right? So if you're only doing a small area, that's a lot different than if you're doing all of Los Angeles. And also the number of times we measure. So for example, in that example, when I spoke about Vienna, we did 4 measurements, right? So there was an ongoing monitoring. Other analyzed projects that are only looking for a baseline. But typically that's where the price points are. And if that's of interest, feel free to reach out. Our team always works with different governments to figure out what works for budgets and timing. The other part of that question is the time. So for example, right now in one of our projects with Memphis and with Hayward, or not Hayward, well, yes, with Hayward, but also Norfolk, which I showed, we are working very closely with multiple city departments, which include the GIS teams, the communications teams, and in one example, the mayor's office, and another example, the city manager. Why? Because those cities, as an example, are really interested in getting to the root cause to solve it. They're not looking for a Band-Aid. They're like, this is a big problem. We have raised our hand and said, it is affecting our life. And we want both the economy, the environment, public health, property value, even crime. We're done with it. What do we do to get to end it? And that includes, how do we communicate? How do we have the proper data? How do we work from a geospatial perspective to really have a statistically significant coverage? So those are some of the variables that lead into that pricing.
I guess my last, I don't really have a question, but would you guys be able to send me information? I believe you have your contact information, but anything that you can send to me to send out to everyone, how to get in contact with you, any additional information they may need. Like I said at the beginning, I send them, all the attendees, a PDH certificate. And then I will also send the other folks who did not attend today the information about you guys, and they can watch this. So I'll send them some more information as well, because I did record it. So they will have access to that.
Of course.
Excellent. And thank you. And I want to apologize. I got a avalanche of great questions. I'm sorry for the short responses, but again, happy to continue the dialogue and be less curt. I apologize for that, but I just wanted to make sure I got everybody's direct message.
I did have a question. I'm sorry. This is Sonia Holmes in Memphis with the stormwater department. Sorry, I got on late. But I did have a question about the education piece. You said that you guys do have an educational component. Is that something that you're sharing or that I could get access to?
100%, Sonia.
Yes. I will put that in the chat, and I will also go in the email.
Okay, awesome. And I don't know why my son's name pops up. I'm like, Michael Holmes? He's on?
Yeah, I asked you. I was like, oh, I know who that is now. It took me a second. I'm getting back to work. So, during vacation and holidays, your brain doesn't always work correctly. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. I don't know why it's on there, because this is the work computer. I'm like, why?
Oh, he's done something you don't know about. Anyone else before we get moving on? Well, thank you guys so much for talking today. I think this is, I'm very interested in litter. I'm such a big advocate of getting rid of it and cleaning it up, and I've been doing it for so long. So I think this was really fabulous. This is something different that we haven't had before. So I really, really appreciate you guys reaching out and doing this. I will send any information. I'll wait until you guys send me anything that you would like to before I send anything out. No rush. I always tell folks it could be Friday before I get anything back out to them. So that's no big deal with that. I want